Hey everybody, Jake here with TrendSpider to go over the weekend video update into mid-September, and really the markets are starting to show some signs of potentially breaking down a little bit, and finally we got that price action to confirm that. And remember, we were talking about last week, a lot of people are talking about the markets are going to go down in September, but we really need price action to determine that for us. And we finally got that today on Friday, where we broke down through this August 19th anchored VWAP. You can see here that I also have an offset here, which really just took into account some of the price action that did not initially test this anchored VWAP from the 19th. So you'll see here the secondary line did capture some of that price action on the way down over the last several weeks. And then finally we broke through this whole entire area. And that's something to actually start to pay attention to, and the fact that we did break down through that level may start telling us, hey, caution may be warranted here. So the main thing that I'm watching is the gap below. So I'm just using the gap snake on TrendSpider to highlight this gap really from late July. So this gap still does have a little bit to fill to the downside. So that would be a target if we continued to move down into the coming week or weeks. And on the weekly side, you can see here that we're getting very close to the apex of this ascending wedge. Now, we still have quite a ways to go up, but it's getting very tight up in here. So will we resolve to the upside or the downside? We'll have to see, but this is exactly the time where you just want to simply put on an alert on both sides of the wedge, so you're not having to guess. You just right click, create an alert. Whenever the price breaks through this line to the downside on the 30-minute candle, let's say expires in 10 days, we do that here. We also do it here. And then you don't have to really stare at the chart and wait for this thing to do its thing to the upside or the downside. We just wait, 2 weeks, and if it doesn't break down, we'll reactivate the alerts. But for now, we're just kind of stuck up here, and until we go up or down, that's kind of the main levels to watch on the weekly side of things. Now on the Qs, something very similar kind of going on. You can see here that we do have this measured move with the extensions that we were talking about the previous weeks. And you'll see here that we literally pulled back right to this 1.618 extension that we were talking about as kind of a breakout zone a couple weeks ago. Now it's acting as potentially a support zone going into the week ahead. On top of that, if I kind of move this ascending triangle resistance, you'll see that we also have a gap below that would fill right around 368. So keep that in mind to the downside if we do continue to move down into the week ahead. And then on the weekly chart, you'll see here that even though we had a red raindrop, there actually is a decent amount of volume at the top of the range. So that's something to consider for the weekly side of things, that even though it was a very red week, a majority of that volume actually still was at the top of the range. So, if the market has started to make a move to the downside, there are still some variables in play that suggest that, maybe this is just a short-term pullback. So we'll just have to play it by ear. But the main thing on the Qs, if we do break down through that 1.618 extension, definitely watch for maybe that 370 area below, and then that gap below around 368. So those are the levels to watch on the Qs. If we go to IWM is definitely having some trouble here. You can see that very similar to SPY. We did break down through this August 19th anchored VWAP. That's something to keep in mind for a potential bigger move to the downside, and that's really what I was looking at for kind of maybe starting to turn a little bearish. Now, I'm not full out bearish by any means, but the fact that we do have that close below on these anchored VWAPs from this most recent swing low is definitely something to consider, and that's the price action we were waiting on to see that confirmed. So definitely reasons to be a little cautious into the weeks ahead, and that gap below is right around 216 on IWM. Now on IWM's weekly chart, you'll see here that we still do have this huge volume shelf here. So if we anchor from the COVID lows, you'll see that we're kind of just trading right at the point of control. That's pretty much where we closed for the week. And so once again, this thing is absolutely stuck. And until we break through the resistance or support to the upside or the downside, we're going to continue to be stuck here. So, for now, not a lot going on IWM other than a lot of chop. Now, let's go into BTC USD, Bitcoin real quick, just to get an idea of what crypto is looking like. We did have a huge move to the downside, which is something to really consider, especially when Bitcoin and crypto in general will give you an idea of the liquidity in the market. So anytime you have this type of flash crash, it is worth noting in the broad markets like SPY, the Qs, that is a significant drop. And so it's not shocking that we did actually have a pretty rough end to the week on the market or in the market, because this was a pretty big knife and possibly foretelling maybe some liquidity. I don't want to say issues, but maybe there's some liquidity variables arising here going into mid-September. So that is the daily. We bounced right on this swing low, anchored VWAP from July 19th. But then if you look at the weekly chart, you'll also see that was right in conjunction with the all-time high anchored VWAP. So not only did we have the July 19th anchored VWAP bouncing pretty much right at it, but we also had the all-time high anchored VWAP that we did bounce right at as well. So nice confluence there. The fact that we are starting to kind of go back into this wick tells me that we could definitely be seeing maybe this anchored VWAP from the July 19th low being retested sometime over the weekend. And then you'll see here that on the weekly side of things, that is right around 42.5 or so. So that is crypto, just a very general overview of crypto. I'm not going to go too deep into it. Bitcoin is a great way to kind of get an idea of where at least some of the bigger names are right now. So let's go into FUBO. This one actually held really well for such a weak day in the market. And you guys will notice we're going to talk about gaps a lot in this video. So on FUBO, we do have a gap above. We do have this wick that we're always going to want to look at the raindrop here. So we've got this wick here, and then if we turn on the raindrop, you'll see that there's quite a bit of volume actually at the top of the range for Friday within that wick. So that tells us that there was some pretty aggressive buying going in on during the day, and actually that supply was being absorbed by buyers' demand near the top of the range. So pretty strong setup there. And then on the weekly chart, you'll actually see that we have 3 blue raindrops over the last month and a half or so. And so that's very interesting considering we haven't had one of those in a while. So we've got this symmetrical triangle forming. If we anchored the volume by price from this 2020 low, you'll see that we're trading pretty much right at that area. And anytime you do have a blue raindrop in general, especially like 3 in a row, that's worth noting possibly for a continuation to the upside. Notice here back in the 2020 low, we had a blue raindrop before marking the bottom and then continuing up higher from there. And we really haven't had a blue raindrop since June of 2020. So the fact that we've had 3 in the last 5 weeks is something that you definitely want to keep in mind, especially the fact that we're kind of trading right above that point of control in that volume shelf. This thing could be ready for a bigger move, especially with that relative strength that we had on Friday with the markets being so weak. So that's FUBO. Going into another one that held pretty well this week considering the markets was Disney. So we talked about Disney being kind of stuck within this range, and it's still stuck within this range. Got rejected multiple times over the last week. And you can see that we do have a gap below. That's worth noting. But if you look at the weekly chart, and we'll kind of go backwards here. So if we go to the regular candle, you'll see that we have this wick. So anytime we have a wick like this, like we just did on FUBO, you want to see what was going on within that wick. Was there volume? Was there no volume? In this case, you can see here, if I just make an arrow, let's make that a little smaller. And then we turn on the raindrop, you'll see that there is quite a bit of volume actually within that wick. So that bulge of volume at the top is bullish. We do need to break through the range here, the top of the range, but for now, that is definitely a raindrop that you'd want to see versus some of the other ones out there this week. So all in all, definitely still holding very strong, especially with the market conditions deteriorating a little bit. So Disney definitely should be one to keep on watch, maybe for some relative strength into the week ahead. Going into Unity Software, this is one that has been very strong over the last month and a half, maybe 2 months at this point. You'll see here that if we turn off the volume by price, on the weekly chart, you can see we're getting pretty tight up here within this ascending wedge. And then on the daily side, you'll see here that, once again, we're talking about gaps using the gap snake. We do have this gap above that would fill right around 148. So we're actually just nearing the bottom of that gap, and we'll have to see if this actually fills going into the week ahead. But whenever you're looking for gaps or gaps to the upside, gaps to the downside, the gap snake is really the thing to use. So you don't have to go manually look for them. So That's an indicator on the platform. You just go to indicators and type in gap snake, and it will literally pop up. And you may find a gap that looks like a gap, but it's not showing up. You always want to mess around with the gap factor here. So the bigger the gap, the bigger the factor. So 0.5 is only going to look for bigger gaps. If you use 0.1, it's going to find those smaller gaps as well. So you'll see here right now, these smaller gaps are showing up, but I am assuming, I haven't done this yet, so this is going to be kind of live, but I would say that if we did a 0.5, those gaps are going to go away, only this big one's going to show. Yep, so you can see here, if you do want to only look at the bigger gaps, just make that gap factor a little bigger. So 0.5 is generally what I'll use. So here you can see, if you do want to create an alert when this gap starts filling, just right click, create an alert at that line, and then whenever the gap starts to fill, you'll be able to get that alert through your phone, so you don't have to stare at the screen and wait for that gap to start filling. Your phone will just go off whenever the alert is triggered. So all in all, Unity is still looking very strong. We're nowhere near all-time highs yet. All-time highs are way up around 175. So all in all, this one is definitely holding very well. So going into the meme stock realm of things, AMC is actually looking very strong here, and it's interesting because GameStop really isn't. So AMC is kind of doing its own meme stock thing here. You'll see here the main thing we wanted to get through was this all-time high anchored VWAP, and you'll see that we got through it. You can see this little peekaboo above this ascending triangle resistance and that swing high anchored VWAP. And you'll also see that here on the daily chart too. So the fact that we did finally close above it, I think brought some new buyers in, some new participants who were maybe looking at that level to break. And all in all, a very strong candle, especially considering the market conditions on Friday. Very strong raindrop here with a lot of that volume at the top of the range during this breakout. So definitely one to keep an eye on going into the week ahead, especially with this weekly ascending triangle breakout that we had as well. The last one we'll go over is DKNG, DraftKings. This was just a really textbook setup this week. So you can see here that we had this ascending triangle forming, and this orange line was simply just this pivot here. So remember, anytime that you have previous price action to the left, you want to take that into account. So I get a lot of people asking, when am I using fib extensions? When am I not? Well, in this case, you just use this previous high here, and that would be our next target above. We don't need to use a 1.618 extension for something that still has price action to the left. So in that case, DKNG did exactly what we were thinking it would do, which is literally move right up to that previous pivot, had some trouble, and we'll have to see if it gets through going into the week ahead. Very strong raindrop here. So you can see here on the weekly chart, a lot of volume at the top of the range. The only thing that I'd point out here is that you do have a pretty textbook head and shoulders setup here. And, doesn't mean that it has to materialize, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. And if we do kind of retest these highs around 74, that would definitely be invalidated. But for now, it's just worth something to keep in the back of your head if you are bullish on DKNG, and the market with it being a little weak going into the week ahead, maybe something to consider as well. But did want to point that out on DKNG. So the last one that we'll touch on here is Snow. So Snow has been just an absolute beauty over the last several months. You can see here that last week we were really looking for this trend line to be broken through to the upside, and that's exactly what we got earlier this week, kind of midweek. And the fact that we finally did hit that target above, we didn't get right to 325, but we did get within this orange area. So that is something to definitely keep in mind. Same thing, right? We simply just use those previous highs as the target, as an area of potential resistance. So we just took these areas here. So if we want to circle them 1 and 2, we just extended that horizontal level, and that's exactly where the price has been able to gravitate to the upside. It all started with the volume shelf down here. So we finally got the volume shelf acting as a nice launch pad for price, and for the last 3 weeks or so after that weird move to the downside after whatever analyst report came out, we've pretty much been nonstop from there. So we bottomed out around 248, and now we hit a high of around 324 or so for Snow in the past week. So all in all, a great case study on the volume shelf acting as a nice base for price to move up, and then using just these simple pivot points as levels above whenever you do have price action to the left. And as I mentioned, remember, if we were at all-time highs, we'd want to use a fib, but we weren't at all-time highs. We had these levels to the left, and that's why we used those as potential resistance. So hopefully this video is helpful. Remember, everybody, if you do enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe. We'll be doing these videos a lot more on the weekends to give everybody just a general perspective on the markets. And as always, if you have any questions, let us know. We do have the 7-day free trial on TrendSpider to check out all these different features that I've touched on, plus a ton of other features as well. And if you are interested in the volume shelves, just go to Jake's volume shelf scanner. So you go to market scanner here, and anybody that has an account, just type in Jake's volume shelf scan will pop up, and you'll be able to find these setups without having to manually search for them as well. So a lot of things you can do on the platform. Hopefully this video is helpful not only to understand the platform a little better, but also get an idea of what the markets are looking like into the week ahead. Everybody have a great weekend, and thanks for watching.